William Gibson wrote in Neuromancer more than 40 years ago. Neuromancer was personality, Neuromancer was immortality. At the time, the idea of a human mind continuing inside of a machine belonged comfortably to science fiction. Today, the individual components of that idea are moving into clinical trials, large-scale computer simulations, and serious mathematical research. I wrote Immortality 2045 for the Gateway Corporate Journal on August 7th, 2026. Its argument is deliberately aggressive. Almost certainly by 2075, and plausibly by 2045, humanity will possess technology capable of keeping a person's mind running after the biological body has failed. Once the technology matures, access could cost roughly the same as an average monthly rent. That claim deserves skepticism. Artificial human-level intelligence remains speculative, and technological immortality is even more controversial. I approach this as a generalist interested in theoretical systems, not as a neuroscientist or biohacker. My purpose is to identify the required components, measure current progress, and ask whether any remaining barrier appears physically or computationally insurmountable. The answer, based on work already underway, is increasingly difficult to dismiss. Two barriers separate the living human mind from a durable continuation on a computer. The first is an engineering specification. A working system requires three tightly integrated components. 1. A living biological host brain. 2. A computer capable of running an accurate and efficient model of that brain. And 3. A bidirectional interface that continuously exchanges signals between them. The second barrier is theoretical. A brain contains an immense number of interacting variables: synaptic weights, electrical potentials, channel conductances, chemical concentrations, and changing connections. A practical simulation cannot track every molecule and ion. We need to demonstrate that the important behavior of this nonlinear system can be represented by a much smaller, more tractable model without losing the patterns that constitute memory, cognition, and identity. The proposed system does not depend on scanning a dead brain and hoping that a copy wakes up. It begins while the person is alive. The biological brain and its computer model operate together, exchange information, correct divergence, and gradually share more of the same cognitive workload. Continuity is the central requirement. Each part of that system sounds extreme in isolation, but none of the parts begin from zero. Start with the interface. Brain-computer interfaces have already moved beyond one-off laboratory demonstrations and into multi-patient clinical programs. Neuralink's January 28, 2026 update is titled 2 Years of Telepathy. In the written article, this is citation 6. According to that update and the comparison sources cited alongside it, Neuralink had enrolled 21 participants across the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom by early 2026. Its implant uses 1,024 electrodes in chronic operation, with plans to move toward 3,000 electrodes and more automated insertion. The important fact is not simply that these electrodes can read brain activity. Participants are using the devices to produce useful output. Demonstrations include computer cursor control exceeding 10 bits per second, robotic arm operation, and early speech decoding. These are narrow capabilities, but they establish a loop between intention, reported neural activity, computation, and action in the outside world. Neuralink is only one architecture. Citation 1, Neuralink versus Synchron, Complete BCI Comparison 2026, describes Synchron's stentrode, which reaches the brain through a blood vessel rather than inserting threads directly into tissue. Citation 2, Neuralink finally has a real rival. Paradromics just put a brain chip in its first patient, reports the first chronic connexus implant in mid-2026. Citation 5, China just approved the world's first commercial brain implant, covers the approval of the NEO device for people with spinal cord injuries. These systems differ in placement, invasiveness, and bandwidth. The field is not waiting on one company or surgical technique. Penetrating threads, endovascular stents, and surface arrays are competing to read more signals, stimulate more precisely, remain stable longer, and make implantation safer. Current implants remain far short of the bandwidth required to model a whole person. 1,000 electrodes against roughly 86 billion neurons is a severe limitation, although neurons interact in populations and may not require one electrode per cell. Progress requires higher density, better longevity, automated surgery, and reliable two-way stimulation. Those are measurable engineering targets. The devices are already in human beings, recording for extended periods and translating neural activity into useful commands. The unresolved question is how far the principles can scale. The second physical component is the simulation itself. Researchers have already completed the connectome of the adult fruit fly, covering approximately 140,000 neurons and 50 million synapses. A connectome is a map of which neurons connect to which others. Citation 7 is Eon Systems' March 7th, 2026 publication, the first multi-behavior brain upload. The work described there places a connectome-constrained model inside a simulated body, closes the loop between sensation and movement, and produces multiple behaviors. This does not establish a conscious digital fly. A wiring diagram is not automatically a mind, and matching selected behaviors does not prove complete fidelity. It does show that a mapped nervous system can drive an embodied simulation that receives input and acts on its environment. The next major target is the mouse. Citation 15, Building Brains on a Computer, describes expansion microscopy, protein barcoding, and AI-assisted tracing that could reduce a full mouse connectome to roughly $100 million in 5 years of work. That places mammalian mapping within institutional budgets. Human-scale simulation has also been tested from the other direction. Simplified models containing 86 billion neurons have run across clusters with roughly 14,000 GPUs. These simulations do not include every biological detail necessary for a faithful individual mind. They demonstrate that neuron count by itself does not make the computational problem impossible. The cited estimates place real-time human-scale simulation under moderately detailed assumptions in the range of 10 to the 18th through 10 to the 20th floating point operations per second. Citation 19, Will whole brain emulation matter for the AI transition? And citation 17, From Worm to Human, Scaling Brain Emulation, discuss this scaling problem. That range sits near the frontier of the largest compute clusters operating in 2026. Raw compute is only a part of the cost. A convincing model also needs correct architectures, useful biological detail, continuous calibration, and an individual's changing state. Even so, present hardware is separated from the largest estimate by efficiency, access, and model design rather than dozens of orders of magnitude. Now combine the implant and the simulation. At first, the model would be a personalized prediction system. It observes neural activity, receives the same sensory context available to the biological brain, and learns to anticipate patterns of attention, perception, and response. The implant compares the model's output against the host brain's continuing activity. Errors become training data. As the interface improves, communication becomes bidirectional. The model can send pattern stimulation into the brain or contribute to a motor command. Existing closed-loop systems perform simpler versions when they decode intended action and return usable output through simulation, synthesized speech, or a robotic device. The proposed extension concerns internal cognitive states rather than only external actions. The computer model would learn the host's recurring representations of memories, concepts, expectations, and decisions. Both systems would process shared information and remain synchronized through continuous correction. The transfer happens gradually. The model begins as a backup or assistant, perhaps recovering words, preserving memories, or taking over functions damaged by disease. Later, it assumes more perception, planning, recall, and decision-making. The biological brain continues to participate throughout. This separates gradual continuation from ordinary duplication. A scanned software copy creates an obvious identity problem because the biological person remains while the copy begins elsewhere. In a synchronized hybrid, the same causal process extends across both substrates before either operates alone. There is no established experiment proving that subjective inference would follow this transfer. Neuroscience does not currently provide a meter for personal continuity. The architecture offers a defensible route through the problem because it preserves ongoing function and causal connection at every stage. It does not settle the metaphysics by declaration. Once one model can remain synchronized with the host, the same architecture can support several models in parallel. Each instance receives state updates from the biological brain and from the other instances. The models can be slightly diversified, assigned different functions, and brought back into consensus. One might specialize in long-horizon planning, another in memory consolidation, and another in sensory prediction. The biological brain retains executive control while it remains active. The relevant precedent comes from multi-agent research. Citation 23 is Collective Decision-Making by Embodied Neural Agents. It examines how neural agents can reach group decisions through local sensory motor interaction. Citation 24, neuromass, multi-agent systems as neural networks with joint reinforcement learning. And citation 25, brain-inspired graph multi-agent systems for LLM reasoning, describe systems in which specialized agents coordinate through changing communication structures. Citation 26, BMAS, a brain-inspired multi-agent system with PFC-guided task coordination, extends that idea to task allocation and executive control. These papers provide engineering principles for distributing computation while maintaining coordinated state. They do not demonstrate a swarm of conscious human minds. A single computer is a poor container for something expected to survive indefinitely. Synchronized instances can detect corruption, cover failure, and preserve the cognitive trajectory while hardware is replaced. Exchanging compressed latent states instead of every simulated spike keeps bandwidth more manageable. The ensemble also changes the meaning of gradual transfer. By the time the biological host dies, the computer models have already participated in perception, memory, and decision-making for years. The organism's death removes one component from an already distributed system. It does not initiate the digital person for the first time. Citation 28, Uploading and Branching Identity, and Citation 29, David Chalmers' Uploading, a Philosophical Analysis, examine copying and gradual replacement. If identity depends on preserved functional organization and an unbroken causal stream, gradual transfer has a stronger claim to survival than destructive scanning. Anyone who believes identity requires the original biological material will reject that conclusion. The deepest technical objection is the brain's complexity. A microscopic model would contain trillions of changing parameters across synapses, ion channels, neuromodulators, timing, and chemistry. A practical system must compress that activity without removing what makes the person recognizable and behaviorally continuous. Large neural recordings provide evidence that this may be possible. Citation 12 is titled Simultaneous Cortex-Wide Dynamics of Up to 1 million Neurons Reveal Unbounded Scaling of Dimensionality with Neuron Number. Its title is important because it prevents an easy exaggeration. Neural dimensionality does continue to grow as more neurons are measured. The brain does not collapse neatly into a tiny fixed set of variables. At the same time, the bulk of behaviorally relevant activity often lies on much lower dimensional manifolds. In plain language, hundreds of thousands of neurons can move together through a smaller number of coordinated patterns. Citation 13, High-Dimensional Neuronal Activity from Low-Dimensional Latent Dynamics, a solvable model, examines how rich observed activity can emerge from simpler underlying dynamics. Model order reduction techniques identify dominant patterns and build smaller surrogates for much bigger networks. Citation 14, Model Order Reduction in Neuroscience, surveys methods including proper orthogonal decomposition, dynamic mode decomposition, and discrete empirical interpolation. Koopman operator theory offers a second route. A nonlinear system can sometimes be represented as linear evolution in a chosen space of observable functions. The biology remains nonlinear, but important changes become predictable with linear operations. Citation 9 is Data-Driven Modeling of Brain Activity Using Neural Networks, Diffusion Maps, and the Koopman Operator, published in Chaos in 2024. Citation 10 is Automated Global Analysis of Experimental Dynamics through Low-Dimensional Linear Embeddings, published in NPJ Complexity in 2025. Related methods have been applied to EEG, ECOG, fMRI, and hippocampal local field potential data. Citation 21, Transient Neural Dynamics Reconstruction, addresses fast events that simpler models can miss. The open question is fidelity. A model could reproduce motor output while failing to preserve a memory, personality trait, or a subjective experience. Researchers must determine which information is noise, redundant, or load-bearing for this specific person. The article proposes reducing trillions of microscopic variables to billions of effective parameters. That has not been proven in the general case. Evidence shows exploitable neural structure, dynamics learned in reduced spaces, and nonlinear behavior approximated through linear embeddings. Scaling those results to an individual brain remains a central experiment between here and 2045. Even if the system works, immortality has little practical meaning if only states and billionaires can afford it. Citation 11, How Much Does a Brain Implant Cost? 2026 Pricing Guide places a first-generation commercial brain-computer interface, including the device, surgery, calibration, and first-year follow-up in the range of $50,000 to $100,000. The long-term target described in citations 1 and 6 moves towards automated manufacturing and surgery priced more like an elective procedure, roughly $2,000 to $5,000. That projection depends on high volume, regulatory acceptance, and surgical automation. It should be treated as a target, not a present quote. Simulation follows a different cost curve. A first mouse-scale emulation could consume roughly $1 billion in research investment by the mid-2030s, and a first human system far more. Later systems would reuse the mapping tools, software, architecture, and specialized hardware. Event-driven simulation, pruning, and neuromorphic accelerators could reduce compute and energy requirements. Cochlear implants, genome sequencing, and computing all progress from expensive research to standardized platforms. None of those examples guarantees the same result here, but each shows how badly a mature product's cost can be misread from the first prototype. Citation 22, the rent index, U.S. typical rent hit $1,965 in June 2026, provides the benchmark used in the article. The claim is that implantation, model initialization, and continuing compute could eventually be financed or subscribed to at roughly $1,700 to $2,000 per month in 2026 purchasing power. That number is the forecast's least certain part because it combines technical progress, manufacturing scale, energy prices, regulation, insurance, and market structure. Once discovery has been amortized, copying software and manufacturing standardized electronics cost far less than inventing them. An enormously expensive research project could still become an ordinary service within a generation. The case for digital immortality by 2045 rests on a chain of claims, and every link matters. Brain implants already read useful signals from living people and return those signals as movement, cursor control, and speech. Connectome-based simulations already produce embodied behavior in small animals. Human-scale neuron counts have already been tested in simplified computer models. Neural recordings reveal structure that model reduction and Koopman methods can exploit. Multi-agent systems provide a basis for redundant, distributed computation. Gradual synchronization offers a stronger account of personal continuity than destructive scanning. None of that proves that a conscious person can survive biological death. It makes the problem divisible into experiments, engineering specifications, scaling laws, and philosophical criteria. 20 years is aggressive. 50 years allows more room for mapping, interfaces, computation, validation, and cost reduction. The prediction is therefore simple. By 2045, digital continuation may be technically available and priced within the reach of ordinary households. By 2075, absent a fundamental discovery that blocks the path, it is likely to exist in some mature form. The argument will attract criticism because it touches neuroscience, computation, economics, and personhood all at once. That criticism is useful. The productive question is which link cannot work and what evidence establishes the limit. If you have an answer, leave it in the comments. Cite the point you disagree with and the evidence that changes it. If you found this argument useful, leave a like and subscribe for future videos. This video is based on my article Immortality 2045. The complete article and all 29 references are available at gatewaycorporate.org/blog and through the link in the video description. Thank you for watching.